Hello lovely people, I'm Jessica. My pronouns are she, her, and welcome back to my channel. We talk about chronic illness, disability, queer history, vintage fashion, and parenting as a lesbian. If you're interested in fun chats and deep dives into those topics, you should hit the subscribe button down below here, so YouTube will hopefully let you know when I post new videos. Hopefully. It should do that. Jessica, you don't have to tell everyone that you're gay and disabled. Actually, there's a very good reason why someone might be open about a part of themselves, like being gay or struggling with mental illness. Did you know that research led by Daniel Del Posto, Associate Professor of Sociology and Social Data Analysis at the Pennsylvania State University, long thing to say, found that respondents who were acquainted with at least one gay or lesbian person in 2006 exhibited greater shifts towards increased acceptance, homosexuality and gay marriage in 2008 and 2010. According to an article by Gwen Avals for NBC News in 2018, the study also found that whilst older, politically conservative straight people were the ones most likely to be against same-sex marriage in 2006, they were also the ones most likely to change their views on homosexuality and gay rights upon gaining a gay or lesbian acquaintance in subsequent years. We can change the world, see? We just have to make friends with the other side. Oh no. Oh gosh. Is this going to descend into a centrist talking point? No, don't worry. You're safe. All that to say, knowing just one gay person can change someone's minds about LGBTQ+ rights. Oh, I didn't know that. Today I want to talk about how to respond to common right-wing and centrist-leaning talking points that you might get from an older relative or neighbour or boss or family friend. I know that the majority of my audience are either millennials or Gen Z, or, you know, awkwardly on the cusp and unclear as to which of those you fall into. So let's break down some of these, shall we say, misinformed opinions that the baby boomers in your life might have. Not all boomers. Some of you are great. You know who you are. You know this isn't about you. You know you're fab. But look, we've all heard those comments about political correctness has gone mad, or how no one wants to work anymore. But it can be really hard to come up with a response in the moment, and conversations like these are really important. Not that I'm claiming to be an expert at this myself. There are many times where I've tripped over my words and only managed to think of the perfect response much later in the day, and wished I could go back and deliver an impassioned speech about why disabled people do, in fact, deserve to be treated as human beings with autonomy. I say as a disabled person who is a human being and enjoys her autonomy. I also very much feel the difficulty of having a small child and not wanting him to hear the incorrect things, but also not wanting to hit them with the truth in a way that might not be great for a toddler to hear. Like, you know, when you're under 5, you probably should believe that the world is sunshine and roses. I hope this video will help you avoid some of those moments. This is part 1 of a 2-part series, by the way. In honour of LGBT History Month in the UK this February, this video will debunk misconceptions about the LGBTQ+ community for those boomers. Before we dive into tackling those tricky baby boomer arguments, let's talk about a tool that helps you stay informed, secure, and ready to fact check from anywhere. Surfshark VPN. With Surfshark, your internet traffic is protected by top-tier encryption, giving you peace of mind while researching. Your internet traffic enters an encrypted tunnel, which then helps to shield your identity. Not only does Surfshark keep your information secure, but it also lets you access geo-restricted content by virtually changing your location. Have you ever tried watching a show only available in another country? Well, with Surfshark, that's no problem at all. Plus, one account can be used on an unlimited number of devices, which is, to be honest, my favourite part of the service. So, if you too want to have your information secure whilst fact-checking, go to surfshark.com/Jessica for 4 extra months of Surfshark for free. Or, you know, you can gift a subscription to that baby boomer in your life that does not know how to stay safe online. You young people are always whinging about discrimination, but I think it's very unfair that you're just assuming that everyone in my generation is homophobic or racist or whatever people have decided to take offence to today. Again, I really want to be clear that I'm not saying every boomer's the bigot. In fact, there are plenty of boomers who are themselves queer, trans, disabled, and neurodivergent, because these things aren't new identities, and people like us have always existed. But that doesn't mean that they're not bigoted. Yes, Caitlyn Jenner, yes, I am putting you in my video again. I wish I didn't have to, but here we are. However, it is also true that when it comes to certain political issues, there do seem to be significant generational divides. Writing for the Financial Times in 2022, journalist and data reporter John Byrne-Murdoch notes that millennials in both Britain and the US are by far the least conservative 35-year-olds in recorded history. Yay! Go us! So, with the understanding that these conversations are more nuanced than always being boomers versus Gen Zers, let's talk about how to respond when these topics come up. Oh, all these pronouns, it's so confusing. It's not grammatically correct to use they for a single person. Language is constantly evolving, which can definitely take some getting used to. However, whilst they can refer to a group of people, it has also been used as a single person pronoun for centuries. In fact, you've probably even used it yourself. If you were in a coffee shop and saw that a person had left an umbrella on the table where they had gone, how would you describe that? Oh, well, obviously I'd say that someone's left their umbrella behind. Yes, exactly. We're used to using they, them, and their to refer to a single person when we don't know their gender. So what's different about using it for trans and non-binary people? In a piece for the Boston Globe in 2018, lexicographer and author of Word by Word, The Secret Life of Dictionaries, Corey Samper points to Chaucer, Shakespeare, Jane Austen and Charles Dickens as writers who have all used they in their work to refer to just one person, adding that it has been in consistent use in English prose since the late 1300s. And even as grammarians and language writers rail against it as ungrammatical and sloppy, over the last decade or so, they, as a pronoun for non-binary people, has been increasingly acknowledged by dictionaries and academic writing styles. There's an article from Merriam-Webster about the use of they-them pronouns for non-binary people, which note that using them may take some getting used to, but English speakers have been through this territory before. This next bit's going to get a little grammar heavy, but I think it's important to point out that the way we use pronouns changes all the time. Whilst we use you today to describe just one person or a group of people, Merriam-Webster explains that the word you was originally solely a plural pronoun. Back when people were speaking Old English, it was used as the object of a verb, as in, I remember you both, while ye was the subject of the verb, as in, ye were in my class. They both mean both. Their singular counterparts were thou and thee. I gave thee a high five. And thou gavest me a high five. By the mid-13th century, people had begun to use you and ye when describing just one person, often to signal respect. So then you began to be used for one person as the usually a superior, again as a signifier of deference or respect, and ye started to fade from use in the mid-16th century. Sad. Leaving you as the sole second-person pronoun in English. The idea of they only being a plural pronoun makes about as much sense as suggesting we all start using thou and thee again. And while the debate about pronouns might be positioned as a modern issue, pronouns have always been political. He used to be used as the default pronoun for everyone when it came to writing legislation. In Stamper's piece, they quote Dennis Barron, a professor of English and linguistics at the University of Illinois, who notes that one of the arguments made by 18th and 19th century suffragists was that the courts should take a more expansive and inclusive view of the pronoun he in laws and amendments. They used the grammar of the day against itself. If he were truly a gender-neutral pronoun that referred generally to any person, as many said, then why is it only read as such in laws or statutes that are somehow punitive, like tax or criminal statutes, and not also in laws or statutes that might grant rights like voting? It's totally normal to have a period of adjustment where someone in your life starts using new pronouns. It's understandable you don't get it right away, and no one's going to hold it against you if you make a mistake a couple of times and get it wrong. The important thing is that if that does happen, you apologise, correct yourself, do your best to get it right in the future. But I don't use pronouns. Okay. When someone says they don't use pronouns, it's usually a sign that they're not willing to acknowledge that not everyone uses she, her, or he, him pronouns. I don't think they mean to out themselves as a person who doesn't understand grammar. Which essentially amounts to not acknowledging that trans and non-binary people exist. While it might be tempting to point out that I is itself a pronoun, that we all have and use pronouns, it's not necessarily worth engaging in a conversation with someone who is willfully misunderstanding language because they don't want to extend basic respect to trans people because they'll just find another way to be disrespectful. Remember that you're allowed to step away from these conversations if you need to. I don't understand why gay people are complaining all the time. They have marriage equality now. There's no need to force all this gay stuff down our throats. LGBTQ+ people can get married now, but that doesn't mean we don't still face discrimination. Marriage is not the be-all and end-all of a person. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but as of the 5th of September, the ACLU is tracking 530 anti-LGBTQ+ bills in the US that have been introduced in 2024. And you know, a lot of stuff has happened in just the past 30 days. Even just last year, we had the Don't Say Gay laws prohibiting discussions of queerness in schools, or even letting teachers suggest that some students might have two mums or two dads. A piece from PEN American by the manager of editorial projects for the Free Expression and Education team, Sam LaFrance, writes that as of August 2023, North Carolina, Iowa and Indiana had all passed Don't Say Gay type laws that include provisions that would require teachers or administrators to out trans students to their parents. LaFrance also pointed out that these laws have contributed to a rise in book bans across the US, and one school district in Florida had banned And Tango Makes Three by Peter Parnell and Justin Richardson, a picture book about two male penguins at the Central Park Zoo who adopt a baby penguin. It's a picture book for little ones. Imagine being so scared of cute gay penguins. Also, LGBTQ+ people just existing in public isn't shoving it down your throats. For centuries, we've had to hide who we are to avoid prejudice or even prosecution under laws that made a fundamental part of our lives illegal. Visibility and representation is also so important to LGBTQ+ young people because they can grow up knowing that they're not alone, that they're not broken. We grow up in a heteronormative society that has no problem pushing a straight agenda that still punishes any deviation despite how much progress we've made. If you don't want to see us, look away, because we're not going anywhere. What's more, it's not necessarily accurate to say that we do have marriage equality. Whilst same-sex marriage has been legal for just over 10 years in England and Wales, many disabled people in the UK risk losing benefits if they get married, regardless of who their partner is. I did. I'm just very fortunate that I married someone who could afford me and was also a nice person. The same is also true in other countries like the US and Canada. In an article for Screenshot in 2022, writer Hannah Turner explains that disabled people who are unable to work due to long-term illness or disability also claim income support benefits, employment support allowance, which is measured by the total income and financial savings of the household. So if a single disabled person who lives alone is not working, they are entitled to the full amount offered. However, as soon as they choose to move in with a partner, a normal and often desirable part of a long-term relationship, their ability to claim ESA changes. In the eyes of the government, the cohabitation between a disabled person and their partner now makes the working partner responsible for the disabled person who is unable to work. This can make disabled people dependent on an able partner, as well as contributing to narratives about disabled people not having agency to make our own choices, or even fall in love. Disabled people are more at risk from intimate partner abuse. And the government thinks it's a good idea to make us financially dependent? Society is structurally ableist, and the last 10 years of Tory government have made no secret their disregard for disabled lives. Labour, we're waiting. Please do show us you are completely different. This ableism compounds to make disabled individuals feel less than, and policies like the ESA household allowance contribute further to feeling like burdensome children, lacking any autonomy. There is the idea that disabled people are viewed as one monolithic group, require looking after, and are not capable of things like romance being desired for marriage. Disabled people still don't have marriage equality, and both disabled and LGBTQ+ people still face discrimination. So we're going to keep talking about it, and we're going to keep existing and living our lives however we want to. Thank you very much. It's not transphobic. I just want to use the bathroom safely. Okay, anti-bac hand wipes. Sharing a bathroom with trans people is completely safe, at least for cis people. In fact, you've probably already done so, even if you don't realise it. You have definitely shared a bathroom with folks who have a different gender to yours. Wow. It's the bathroom in your home or the house you grew up in. It was probably used by everyone, regardless of gender. And you know, bathrooms on trains, planes, generally gender neutral. The myth that sharing a bathroom with trans people isn't safe is entirely fabricated fear-mongering. Julia Serrano, a writer, activist, biologist, and the author of several books including Whipping Girl, a transsexual woman on sexism and the scapegoating of femininity, explains in a 2021 Medium post that while trans people have been using public bathrooms for decades without any issues, suddenly in 2015 a slew of so-called bathroom bills were proposed in US state legislatures. These bills, in one way or another, set out to prohibit trans people from safely using public restrooms under the presumption that they must pose some kind of threat to women and children in those spaces. Ugh. It's literally just recycled homophobia from the 1970s and 80s, and probably later, to be honest. That gay people are dangerous, and that's very much not the good kind of recycling. If such concerns were based in any kind of reality, which, to be clear, they are not, it would make sense that places with legislation that protects trans people from discrimination, such as allowing them to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender, would have an increase in reports of people being harassed whilst using public bathrooms, right? No, there is actually absolutely no evidence. It's worth pointing out that a Teen Vogue article by journalist Ellie Bell about the latter study has the headline, "Study confirms that transgender people are not a threat to cisgender people in bathrooms," with the poignant subheading, "We didn't need a study to tell us this." There is also a 2014 Media Matters article by Carlos Maza and Luke Brinker where they go through the US states that have passed legislation that protect the rights of trans people to use the public bathrooms that align with their gender. They reached out to local police departments and state bureaus of labour and industries and commissions for human rights, and they didn't find a single instance where all the bathroom panic had any basis in fact. However, as Serrano writes, while there is no empirical evidence to indicate that transgender people pose any kind of threat to cisgender people in public bathrooms, the reverse is not true. That is to say, transgender people are routinely harassed and even assaulted by cis people in such settings. 70% of survey respondents reported being denied access, verbally harassed, or physically assaulted in public restrooms. 65% of transgender students in America are harassed at school because of their gender expression. And on top of that, about 70% of transgender students say they have avoided bathrooms at school. It's all really horrific, and it's worth noting that most of this data comes from before the slew of anti-trans legislation that has swept across the US in 2024. And although this anti-trans fear-mongering mostly impacts trans people, and especially trans women, the manufactured panic about trans people in bathrooms also results in cis women's gender expression being policed. Whatever transphobes might claim, it's not remotely feminist to decide who gets to use the bathroom based on who looks like a woman. This has resulted in queer, butch, cis women in particular being challenged when using public bathrooms. Yet another reason why queer and trans rights go hand in hand. all these new genders are so confusing. When I was young, we just had men, women. While the term non-binary itself is fairly new, people whose gender has existed outside the gender binary certainly aren't. And it makes sense if you haven't heard about these people or identities. The history of people who didn't fit within the gender binary has often been erased in order to uphold white supremacist colonial systems of oppression. It's our fave here in Britain, but just because you haven't heard about them, it doesn't mean they don't exist. In this section, I'm going to share the words from non-binary people of colour, but these are only a tiny fraction of the voices and experiences of gender beyond a strict binary. For a good starting place for more perspectives, I'm going to leave a whole lot of links down in the description below. In a piece for the Daily Dot in 2018, Ray Gray writes that many cultures and nations colonised by Western powers have rich histories and traditions of gender fluidity and gender categories beyond men and women. India, for example, has a noted history of hijra as a third gender. Native American cultures have recognised as many as 5 gender roles at one time. The Igbo of Nigeria have terms for people who do not adhere to rigid gender roles, and the Philippines have long recognised Bakla as non-binary gender citizens. Native Hawaiians, whose land was stolen and colonised by Americans, have a third gender or self called Mahu. In a blog post in 2019, poet, comedian and author of Beyond the Gender Binary, Alok writes that policing of gender nonconformity has and continues to be part of the colonial project of making gender and sex binary. They say that there are only 2 genders and sexes, but they don't tell you about the work they do to kill, criminalise, disappear and discredit everyone who exists outside the binary, all the while delegitimizing our knowledge systems. Sex and gender are complicated and diffuse entities which vary amongst bodies, and collapsing them into a bifurcated model of male-female is a recent cultural and racial project, not some fixed and ahistoric biology. I definitely recommend following Alok on Instagram, and their book reports posts, which are handily saved to highlight on their profile, offer lots of recommendations for places where you can learn more about how expansive gender can be and how that expansiveness has been erased. Trans people have a biological advantage in sports. It's not fair to make women compete against men. Where did you hear that trans people have a biological advantage in sport? It's an idea you hear a lot, and even without any data behind it, it's led to trans people, even trans kids, being excluded from sport. And not just competing in sport, but also just playing sports in some cases. Sports columnist Jerry Brewer explains in a Washington Post article in June 2024, in 2020 Idaho became the first state to restrict transgender sports participation, and in the past several years half the country has passed similar laws. Many of them are blanket bans that fail to accommodate any nuance. The success of those measures has created momentum for states to pass legislation limiting gender-affirming healthcare. Trans athletes vary, funnily enough, in athletic ability, just like cisgender athletes. In fact, an Outsports article from 2021 by Dawn Ennis recounts how a federal judge in Connecticut dismissed a lawsuit that had been filed on behalf of 4 young cis women challenging trans-inclusive policies. The suit had specifically named Black trans women and former high school athletes Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood, despite how one of the plaintiffs beat Miller in at least 2 track meets within 9 days of filing the suit in February last year. So, she was already better. Like, what are you gonna sue for? You already won. It's hard to claim that someone has an unfair biological advantage when you're beating them in competitions. While panic over trans people playing sports has been especially loud during and after the 2024 Paris Olympics, trans people's own voices are often entirely absent, she says awkwardly as a cis woman. In an article for Cosmopolitan, journalist Sydney Bauer writes that many sports now require trans women to have transitioned before puberty, at a time when gender-affirming care is increasingly difficult to access and puberty blockers are now banned. Some elite competitions have flat out banned trans women from participating. Quick question. Did the trans athletes have a say in their healthcare when they were prepubescent? As a person who now I'm an adult, has to deal with the fallout of medical decisions made for me whilst I was a child, I'm kind of thinking that they shouldn't be blamed for this. Just like we've already discussed in terms of bathrooms, whilst these bans are designed to target trans athletes, the end result will involve far more scrutiny on everyone's bodies. Everyone, especially masculine women, and especially women of colour. As Barr explains, the absence of trans women in Olympic competitions has not stopped people from fixating on cis boxer Imane Khalif with bigotry and gender panic. And you can watch my video here. It all comes back around to the idea of the gender and sex binary being a tool of white supremacy. And unlike the idea that allowing trans women to play in sports would result in cis men cheating by entering women's competitions, which there's, still no evidence of ever happening, we know that discrimination against cis women, who people believe to be trans, does happen. In a piece for them in 2023, journalist James Factora points to Olympic gold medal winning athlete Caster Semenya, who has been subject to scrutiny regarding her sex since she won gold at the World Championship when she was 18. Factora writes that Semenya was able to continue competing until 2018, at which point World Athletics changed its policy to require female athletes to have a natural testosterone level below a certain amount, or else, if theirs was higher, to lower it through medication. But because of how narrowly tailored the rule was, many critics thought it was aimed specifically to prevent Semenya, who was assigned female at birth and has naturally elevated testosterone levels, from competing. Factora adds that these racist standards regarding sex and gender have also led to Namibian runners Christine Mboba and Beatrice Masilingi, who are both cisgender, being banned from competition due to their testosterone levels, as well as trans sprinter Cici Telfer. These regulations aren't about fairness, they're about policing of gender and excluding anyone who is not sufficiently feminine enough by the standards of white cis womanhood. Also, testosterone doesn't actually make you necessarily a great runner. Have you seen men? Not like Olympic men, not Olympian men, just men. Just on the street men. Just your average Joe. Does she look like a runner? If you really want a super deep dive into the origins of fear-mongering about trans people competing in sports, The Other Olympians, A True Story of Gender, Fascism and the Making of Modern Sport by Michael Walters is a fascinating read, and explains how the current sex testing for athletes competing at the Olympics dates back to literal 1930s Nazi Germany. So, wrapping up, I really hope that you found this video helpful and you can use it as a resource for talking to the boomers in your life. Yes, goodbye. Remember, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. The next installment will debunk misconceptions and teach you how to clap back at boomers who say things like, "No one wants to work anymore." Please leave a comment and let me know if you'd be interested in me doing another video like this, breaking down how to respond to a different set of boomer talking points and topics that you might encounter. Let me know which ones in the comments below. Don't forget to click the link in the description down below. Head to surfshark.deals/Jessica for 4 months of Surfshark for free. As always, I'm sending a huge thank you to the folks in the Kellgren-Fozard Club for your support. The Kellgren-Fozard Club is my membership club, which you can join right here on my YouTube channel. We call our members clubbies, and they get lots of fun perks like access to monthly behind the scenes videos, a shout out on your birthday month, and a little photo of my face after your name when you leave a comment on one of my videos. At a time when it feels like it's increasingly hard to avoid people who are loudly sharing bigoted views online, I am very grateful to my audience and especially my clubbies for helping to make this little corner of the internet a kinder place. Also, fun fact, you can join for just 1 month and attempt to watch all of the videos that have ever been made for the clubbies and then not renew for the next month. I mean, good luck trying to watch all those videos in 1 month. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.